Well, hey everyone, it's Tesla Tom here. Thanks for joining us today. I've got two very special guests with me. I've got Jules and Yvonne from Albury, who are very kindly going to share with us their epic adventure in their Tesla Model S to the centre of Australia. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, Jules, what kind of Tesla do you own?
So I've got a Tesla Model S 75D, with a smaller battery.
And how much range has it got normally?
Well, 350 kilometres when it's fully charged. That's the typical rating that it's giving me. When you go over 100, it's a bit less than that. And you can get a bit more out of it by driving slower. So we found out.
We'll get to that very soon. Yvonne, how much planning had you guys done prior to your journey?
Well, we did several mini trips to find out what we needed to pack, that sort of thing. We got a huge map from the NRMA of Australia and used the, what's it called? PlugShare app to map out where we'd be stopping each day. And not that we always stuck to that. We sometimes went off the beaten track or liked the place so much that we stayed a couple of days there. And so we did a fair bit though.
Yeah, and not long after I set up my my three-phase charging, we did a road trip out to Hay to check the NRMA charges, which was, because I've got the CCS2 upgrade, it's a little bit flaky. And so I was always wary about going off the beaten track without a plan B. So when we got to Hay and it didn't work, we're glad we had a plan B for that.
But we couldn't have done it without the NRMA charges.
No, you couldn't do it without those. No, they're fantastic.
Did you find that, from my personal experience, it's hard to know if they're being used or not. Did you find that an issue too on your trip?
Yeah, it's really risky. We didn't have it on our trip because we were a little bit remote. And Mildura, they've got two, which was a bonus. But yeah, you never really know if someone's going to be there. You'll never really know whether they're going to be there for quite a while too. So, if you rocked up 5 minutes after we plugged in, you'd be waiting an hour and a half to charge. So that's the risk with them. So they're really good. I really appreciate what NRMA is doing. It's great.
Yep, for sure. And I guess on your trip to the Red Centre, you didn't always have the luxury of DC charging. There were times when you guys used, three-phase chargers, even power points, I believe.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I think what we learned on our trip was about finding a place that's convenient to be while you charge. So sometimes that was just plugging into the back of the cabin or out through the window. You get 100, it's slow at 10 kilometres an hour, but you get 100 kilometres of range or 120 if you're there for the night. Destination charges, if you're going to have lunch there, are fantastic. Sometimes you just need that 80 Ks or 50 Ks or 70 Ks. So that was really good. But when you go into the Red Centre, then you've got no choice but to stop at those truck stops. And you need to stop there for a while, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And admittedly, I don't think we were at the right time of the year. So it was pretty hot. There was lots of flies and not much to do.
Yep, I certainly got that impression in your blog there, Yvonne. And a question for you, Yvonne. I guess sometimes there were times when things didn't really go to plan, and there's a lot of walking involved, I believe, sometimes.
Yes. So you'd turn up at a town. Where were we? And you couldn't get anywhere for breakfast. The whole town was closed.
Yeah, Dalton. You expected to drop on the way to Broken Hill. We thought, we'll get going early. We'll get on the road. We'll get there about 9 o'clock, and we'll have breakfast at 9 o'clock while the car charges for an hour.
But they didn't open till 10.
Yeah, they didn't open breakfast till 10. So that was that was a surprise. And we just needed that little bit of charge to get to Broken Hill because from Dareton to Broken Hill is about 330 kilometres or something like that. Maybe 300 kilometres. Yeah. So in our car, we just needed that little bit of extra charge.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair enough. And but when it does work well, it works really well, right? Like, for example, the Euston Club, that was a good place to stay, I believe.
That was fantastic, and that was we're really lucky because a couple of other Tesla owners, Richard and Kristen, were doing a trip the other way around through Cobar, Broken Hill, and so they gave us lots of good tips. And I think Richard probably wrote the book on three-phase charging. He seems to be the expert. So, and they said, yeah, try the Euston Club. It's good. And we stopped there and we thought, oh, gee, this is pretty nice. This place. We'll stay here for another day. Right on the banks of the Murray. And because when we were going during the pandemic, so although we bought a residence, we couldn't go into Victoria for 14 days before we left to go into South Australia because that restriction was still in place. So that sort of set our path on the way there up through Broken Hill. And if we tried to go through, technically you could drive through Victoria if you didn't stop, but the charger in Mildura would mean that we'd have to stop. So that's why we chose that road up through Broken Hill, and also to see Broken Hill too. So the drama with Broken Hill and that was that the only charger there was a home charger that belonged to John Hart, and it's right next to the gallery. But we didn't realise that how like home it was. So we got there and they rang up John, and John says, "Oh yeah, no worries, I'll come and move some cars." So he rearranged all his cars so we could park there, and he had a standard charger and also a three-phase setup. So he said, "I'll use the three-phase because it's much faster." So plugged it into the wall, walked down to town. We get down to town, which is down a big hill.
Oh, massive hill.
And we go, "Oh, we'll catch a taxi back." But then the car sends me a message, it stopped charging. So that was a nice little lesson learned about why you screw in those three-phase things. I just thought, oh no, you can just plug them in. But I was always thinking that the screw was for the weather, to keep the weather out. But I think it keeps them from falling out as well.
Okay, so you had to walk back and redo it.
So we went to walk back, and
It was
then
horrendous. It was so hot. It was.
and then we said, "Oh well, look, we can't just stay here in John's driveway. This is a bit awkward for him. We'll go to our caravan park and work out a plan B," which was good because I found out that the showgrounds or the racetrack had three-phase. I rang up the caretaker there, and he says, "Oh, okay, yeah, come and we'll see if we can find you a spot." So that wasn't on PlugShare, and we were able to add that to PlugShare. So that was really good. Yeah.
I guess, were there times when you wished you had a different car? Like, I believe you got stuck with some floodwaters at one stage.
I'll let you answer that one, Emma.
We decided to stay at Euston another night and go to Lake Mungo. And we're driving up this really dirt track for like 180 kilometres.
No, not that far. It's
It
about
felt
100.
like 180 kilometres.
Yeah.
And it was so bumpy and dirty and everything. And, there's bits of water all over the road, which sort of puzzled us a bit, didn't it?
Yeah, because there must have been a rain event that we didn't see any of because it had been clear skies all the way there.
Yeah, so we get 6 Ks from Lake Mungo and the road is completely flooded. Absolutely flooded. We tried walking up one side, but there was the huge channel, that we couldn't drive over. So we tried to go up the other side, but there was bushes and all that sort of thing. And it might have been possible, but if we got stuck, there was no phone service. But my territory would have made it no problem whatsoever.
Yeah, probably, but you don't have any phone service anyway. So still, if it got bogged, we still would have been in trouble. So the risk reward of it wasn't great. And while we were there, this guy came along in his Pajero, drove through the bush, and said, "What are you doing driving on this road? It's closed. Don't you know you'll get fined if you're driving on this road?" Which we thought was odd because he was driving on this road anyway. But it was a bit of an experience. And then when we drove back from Lake Mungo, we went back via Mildura or towards Mildura, the road to Mildura. which was a much bigger road than the goat track
you
we
could
came
go
on.
so much faster and it was so much more smoother.
Yeah, less cattle grids. There wasn't any cattle grids on that one. The other one was full of cattle grids. But yeah, when we got back, we saw the road closed sign. So yeah, we learned a lesson there too.
Research.
Research.
Good advice. Research, definitely. Now, it wasn't all fun and games, was it, Jules? I think there was a moment when you had to hypermile or go very slowly to get to your next destination. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it had been good because we'd been sort of following Richard and Kirsten's trip, and they had to do some hypermiling from Cobar to get to Broken Hill, and we'd looked at going that way, and we thought, oh no, that's not going to be possible in our car. And so there'd been some good discussions about how you do it, and that you can practically get out of any situation by driving slower and slower and slower. So that's the trick, is when I think that was a lesson that we learned when we left Port Augusta. We cruised along at 100 k's an hour and got to Pimba, put some charge in, left when we thought we had enough charge, like about an hour and a half later. Got to Glen Ambo, started charging there, watching it sort of tick over, and it sort of ticks over and it says, oh yeah, you've got 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. And we thought, oh yeah, 6%, we can do that. 6%, not a problem. And we get out on the road and we start off at 100 k's, and then it's saying, you're not going to reach your destination. And then it's 90 k's, you're not going to reach your destination. 80 k's, you're not going to reach your destination. And we tried like following road trains, and they were just like throwing rocks at us. We were just going into this headwind, and I don't think I'd ever kind of got a grip of that a headwind can make such a difference to how you're driving. And it was also a little bit of an incline, sort of all the way. We kind of thought it would be just like flat, but there was sort of uphill. And the distance was, I don't know, 250, 280 kilometres, something like that. So by the end, but there's nothing in between. There's absolutely nothing in between. So you can't plug into a 10 amp socket. You can't plug into anything. There's nothing in between. So we just kept on getting slower and slower and slower until we got to about 60 k's. And then it started to just level off and say 1%. You'll get there with 1%. And we just crawled along, overtaken by road trains, overtaken by cars. I think we would have got overtaken by camels if they'd been on the road. And I was mortified.
You were.
I was totally mortified. But
we did get there.
But we got there. We got there with about 6 k's of range or something. Yeah. So that really it brought home that if you go at a reasonable speed, like if you keep your speed to 80 or 90, you'll cut your stops at those roadhouses to something that you can deal with, because like it's a long time to stop at those roadhouses. And I was totally envious of anyone with a 100D that's got that little bit of extra range. That would have just been very handy.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you it can be done. You just got to go a bit slower, like you said. What was some of the reception and responses from the locals when they saw your Tesla in those places?
Yeah, it was pretty good. They were a bit sceptical that you could actually drive this car on those roads. And a lot of the roadhouses, I'd assumed that there'd been quite a bit of traffic with these plugs, but a lot of the people hadn't seen a Tesla pull in to use them, and so they had to ask other staff members about what the procedure was, and then they wanted to have a chat about it, have a look at it, and sort of,
Lots of people came up to have a chat with you when you were charging.
Yeah. And I think it is kind of interesting for those communities because there doesn't seem to be a power supply. Most of them seem to run off diesel generators, or they're running off solar equipment. So, electricity, they've got a pretty good understanding of what electricity is doing in their communities and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. And Yvonne, how did you find sleeping in the car for that one night?
Oh, that was horrific. Jules had gone to the trouble of making up proper bedding with foam and mattress and pillows and all that sort of thing. But I think for me, it was that just having air conditioning and no fresh air. If I had to redo it, I'd probably look at getting nets and having the windows down or something. But I just woke up and I was so claustrophobic. I just absolutely hated it. So for me, it was a one-night deal, I think.
Yeah. The accommodation at Uluru was pretty pricey. And everything was like a 2-night deal or a 3-night deal, or and I'm not sure exactly why that was, whether they'd pre-sold to other things, or or that's just what you pay when you go out there.
But we hadn't researched or planned ahead.
There's a theme coming through here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it at all. It was quite good. And like my theory was, and this is how I sold it to Yvonne, was like, we're going to stay up late, we're going to get up early, and we're going to see the sunrise over Uluru. So we're not going to be in the car for more than a few hours. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was fine while we were drinking some wine and watching Netflix, but it was after that it all fell apart.
Yeah, 3:00 in the morning.
Well, as long as there was some planning beforehand, that this might have happened, right? Some warning. I guess in summary, what's your overall impression of the charging infrastructure in Central Australia at the moment? And what can be improved?
We would have loved a supercharger just somewhere along the way. Port Augusta is the place that we would have really have done with a supercharger, because that is, you've really, like, when you're travelling, you've got to make that decision about where you stay overnight, and a supercharger just frees up where you can stay. If you can get to a supercharger, it's only like 45 minutes of your time or an hour of your time at most. But anywhere that's a destination charger or 3-phase charging, you're making a commitment. Like if you're going to stay overnight for 4 hours or something, to be there, which is fine if you're sleeping there. But if you don't want to sleep there, to get that charge. So our 3-phase charger, which is kind of a modified high power wall unit, it'll add charge at about 85 kilometres an hour, or 75 if you've got the air conditioning running and watching Netflix. Just to make a little detour off your track costs you a lot of time sitting around.
Okay. I guess in summary, what would you do it again? What would you do differently? What would your advice be to others wanting to do this trip?
I reckon it's a fun trip, and all up we spent, because we're paying for energy at Broken Hill and at the truck stops up and down the Stewart Highway, we spent $95 in energy. If we'd been in Yvonne's car, we would have spent $1,000 or more.
But it would have gotten through the water.
About that, probably. Yeah. And it wouldn't have been a great loss if it didn't.
Touche.
Look, I reckon it's a really fun thing to do, to be honest. We're really keen to go a bit further. Try the Around Australia trip. I think my advice to people that want to do it is keep your distances to around 400 kilometres or less a day.
Well, you're limited though. You've got to go stay at those truck stops because there's nowhere else. You've got to push forward.
Yeah, that's right.
Get there.
That's the bit that you've got to do it. That's your trade-off too, because they probably weren't the cheapest places to stay either.
Or the cleanest.
Yeah, they weren't up to the same standard as other places, but yeah, they were all right.
Yeah, they are all right.
Yeah.
Better than sleeping in the car.
Better than sleeping.
Okay, well, that's a good sign. All All right, guys. Well, that was really interesting, and thanks so much for sharing your experience with us and with those who are wanting to do this trip. And of course, if you guys want to get in touch with Jules, he's on Twitter. He's also on Facebook, on the Tesla Owners Club of Australia Facebook page. He'll give you some more advice on how to attempt this trip. Is there anything else you guys want to share before we go?
I'd probably say your essential cables that you need when you're going. You need your 240 socket because you'll use that quite a lot just to do that top-up charge. So it was really handy if there's like an RMA charger at Mildura. You top up to 250, top it up at your cabin when you go home, and then you've got a full charge to go. Bring your own cable. They are becoming more and more common in places. So supermarkets, the Euston Club, we needed it there, but I think they had one that they'll lend you as well. 3-phase, you definitely need that if you're going off the beaten track. And some sort of adapter, Chatamo or the CCS2, or if you've got a Model 3, you know, you're pretty set for that sort of stuff. So that's about the cables that you need.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.